Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a book I had a very interesting experience reading, and that is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. Now, before we jump into it, let me go ahead and tell you what this book is about. So basically, we follow Claire and her team. They are a team of repair technicians for this relay communication system that humanity has set up to help speed up communication between outer space and getting back to Earth and everything. And while they are doing this, they get a distress beacon, and they have to go and figure out what is going on. They have to go check in on this beacon. And basically what they discover is the equivalent of discovering the Titanic here on Earth. There is this luxury ship, spaceship, that went missing years and years ago, and somehow they are the ones who have finally found it, and they are going up on board and trying to see what they can do. They can salvage it and basically make themselves rich by proving they found it, laying claim to it, and bringing it back to Earth. And unfortunately, once they get onto the ship, they realize something very, very wrong has happened, and they're not exactly sure what happened. And then as they spend time on the ship, they realize not everything is as it seems. So I mentioned I had a very interesting time with this book, and that is because this book in of itself is a rocket ship. And I have this experience a lot with thrillers, but this book was fantastic. I mean, rocket ship shooting up, I was enjoying it. My enjoyment was so high, it was so good. And then all of a sudden it just started crashing down, coming down, lost me, kept losing me more, and I enjoyed it less and less after it hit that peak, which is a really unfortunate thing. Like I said, this seems to be something that happens to me with thrillers quite a bit, where the buildup and the mystery and the not knowing is what really drives me to want to read it. And once some of those pieces start to fall into place, a lot of times they just aren't satisfying enough for me, or I don't like the direction they go, and it just kind of comes crashing down. And I think that is an interesting thing with this book. This is like a thriller, sci-fi, horror book. It's a very interesting mix of genres thrown together here. And with all that being said, I did end up giving it a 3-star ranking. The first 60% of it is so good that even though the last 40% kind of let me down, I still think that evens out to be a pretty good book. And I think this is a book that I would recommend to a lot of people, because you're either going to probably really like it or really not like it, like me. And so I think it's just kind of a fun thing to recommend to people, because there's going to be such a disparity between reading experiences depending on your own reading taste. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the pros and cons of this, starting with the pros. The first thing I want to point out is, like I said, the mystery that is crafted early on in this book is fantastic. The whole time I just wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to keep reading. I wanted to just keep pushing through, and I wanted to know what happened. I will also say that I think it does a very good job of like the creep factor. It's very high. When I was reading this, I was like, oh, this is like pretty spooky. And I will say, I think this would make a fantastic movie. This actually reminded me a lot of, what's his name? Sam, I can't remember. The guy from Jurassic Park is in a movie, I think it's called The Last Horizon, Event Horizon, or something like that. And this book gave me very similar vibes to that movie. And I think that this would be a very well done, like, movie. I think it has a lot of elements that would be like very creepy, good like horror sci-fi kind of book. I mean movie. It is a book. I would like to see it as a movie. But that is the main positive, and really the most positive thing I have to say is I guess the writing is pretty good. It makes you want to go, but the whole time it's just that creeping, the building of tension and suspension, and just giving you like just little bits and pieces of information that kind of paints the picture of what happened without giving you too much until the very end of the book. And I think that's a really hard balance to strike, because you don't want it to be too slow and you're not really giving any answers whatsoever. You do want to have the reader get something, and you want them to be able to kind of try to guess and think what's going on. And I think that's something that could happen as you read this. With knowing what happened, I think you would be very hard pressed to figure out actually what's going on. But I do think that it was an enjoyable experience reading it up into the point where you kind of get those answers. And that's kind of where a lot of the problems with this book ends up lying. And that is really the only positive I have to say, which seems like I only have one thing, but it's just so much of the enjoyment of the book is the mystery and just like the writing and the progression of trying to figure out what's going on. And unfortunately, this is just one of those books where it's going to sound like I'm extremely negative on it, because I have a lot more things to nitpick about it. But like I said, it's still a good book. I still liked it. I still enjoyed my time with it. Just keep that in mind as I go through and start to nitpick this book. Probably more than I should. So my first con is this is a book that has a really weird timeline situation going on. So Claire, our main character, had really horrific things happen to her in the past. And the narrative of this book is happening after the fact of her getting off the ship that they discovered. And you kind of bounce back and forth between present timeline, the past, and then the more recent past. So you have far, far past, you have very close past, and then you have present time. And I found that to be extremely jarring, just the going back and forth between multiple timelines like that, which it's not that anything that complicated happens in this book. It's just that it really kind of broke some of the feel that I had. I just wanted to be in the ship, in the discovered ship. I just wanted to be there and live there. I didn't need the present timeline, though I do think that added a little bit of, well, how did she get out of this situation? Which is a whole other con in itself. The way she gets out of the situation, you basically get no resolution from. It's just a plot thread that's just kind of thrown away. It's like barely mentioned, but whatever. It's not big enough. There are bigger things to talk about than that, though it is frustrating. But that past timeline, I think, could have been completely wiped out because it just didn't feel like it added that much to the story. And it all leads into like my biggest problem with this actual book, and it's that this book didn't know what it wanted to be. It really felt like this is 3 different book ideas that kind of all got sandwiched together and forced to play nice with each other. So this book doesn't know if it wants to be a sci-fi book. It doesn't know if it wants to be a horror book. It doesn't know if it wants to be a mental health struggle book, and it doesn't know if it wants to just be corporation greed and corruption is like the greatest evil in the universe. It doesn't know which one of those 4 like ideas that it presents to you in this book. It doesn't know which one of those it wants to be, because all 4 of those things are in this book, and because there's so much, I don't think any one of them is done incredibly well. I do think the best aspect of it is the creepy ghost ship aspect of it, but I think all of them struggle because there are so many. I think S.A. Barnes had 3 book ideas that she could develop here, not necessarily in a series, but I think there are 3 really good ideas: the horror ghost ship element, space sci-fi, the corporate greed, and then the traumatic mental health stuff. I think those are all 3 stories that she could probably write full-length novels on in of themselves, and they all just kind of got forced into this book. And it was such a struggle and such a disappointment, where you thought it was one thing and it changes to another, and then it changes to another, and then it's another thing, and there's just a lot of messy things structural wise that happen at the end of this book that I won't go into for spoiler reasons, and I do think you should still read this, but yeah, that's my biggest problem is, what did this book want to be? And I know what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be that ghost horror story, and it just failed in that aspect, unfortunately. If you have read this, I would love to know what your thoughts are. I really think that this is probably a divisive book. I think there are people who probably think that the plot twist in here is amazing, and it's what they like. It probably is great for them. And then there are probably more people like me who, once you get to that point, you're just like, really, this is where we're going with this story? And that's really unfortunate, because like I said, the high of this book, man, it soaring. It was great. It was going. And then the crash is just as spectacular as the rise, unfortunately. But that is all I have for this book. I could probably go a little bit more into it in the comments if you want some spoiler stuff. If you have read this, let me know what you think. If you plan on reading this, I think you should. Let me know if I maybe swayed you away from it or towards it. But as always, have a good one.